Would Katniss still have shot Coin if Prim hadn't died? I did kind of vaguely answer this in the comments in my previous video, but I wanted to go into a bit more detail about why I do believe that Katniss still would have always shot Coin, or at the very least would have tried to take Coin out. First of all, narratively, Prim was always going to die. From the very first page where we see Katniss reach across her bed and find Prim not there, we know that Prim is not going to make it to the end of the series. The entire story of the Hunger Games, and especially Katniss' story herself, plays like a game of cat and mouse. And Katniss herself realizes this at the end of Mockingjay when she's playing with the cat in the bunker. She tells Finnick that she realizes that Snow has been dangling Peeta in front of her and making her act like a cat trying to grab at a light. And on a similar vein, throughout the entire series, Katniss is constantly trying to save Prim, trying to reach out for Prim, trying to protect her. But every time she just catches air. Every time she thinks she's got Prim in her grasp, she slips away again. And so while we debate different scenarios wherein Prim didn't die or whether Coin wasn't the one that actually killed Prim, we must also recognize that from a literary sense, Prim was always going to die. And at the end, when Prim finally does die with the bombing of the Capitol Children, it seems that almost spurs Katniss on to wanting to murder President Coin. But much like Prim's death had been set up from the beginning of the series, President Coin's death had also been set up from the very beginning of Mockingjay. And this is shown in the way that from the beginning of Mockingjay, President Coin is set up as the opposite side of the coin from President Snow. They are literally the heads and tails versions of each other. Though President Coin does not host a Hunger Games that forces dozens of children to kill each other each year, she does still run an incredibly oppressive regime, and she does strictly monitor their citizens and their personal freedoms. And just like Snow, President Coin is not above exploiting her own citizens and children to further progress her own political power. And we see evidence of this slipped in throughout the story. But I think the biggest effect on Katniss herself as a narrator is when the people she trusts the most give her hints that something is not right with President Coin. And Katniss does not initially trust Coin, but that is the same with every single person she meets. You look at Katniss's relationship with Finnick, someone she did not like nor trust when she first met him. And it took both Peeta and Haymitch, two people she trusted more than anyone else in that situation, persuading her that Finnick might actually be a good guy and a good ally, as well as Finnick himself proving himself to be a good friend and a good ally, for Katniss to actually even start to trust him a little bit. And so for Katniss to trust someone, she needs both the people in her life telling her that that person is a good person, as well as herself seeing them act that way, and President Coin had neither. Throughout the book and throughout the film, we saw time and time again how suspicious we should be of her. And I think Boggs was a major driving force in this, because Boggs was one of the first people that Katniss trusted almost immediately, without any other input. And before Boggs dies, he tells Katniss that he believes that Coin might have ulterior motives. She might be planning to kill Katniss to further the revolution, and she might have even other plans that we don't yet know about. And as he's dying, he tells Katniss to not trust anyone and to do what she came to do. And then we get to the end, and Prim has been killed in the bombing, and the Capitol has surrendered, and Katniss is grieving in the president's mansion. And I think initially there is little else that she is thinking about other than Prim's death. But throughout the story, Suzanne Collins has set up the idea that President Coin is exactly like Snow, just the flip side of him. This trap has been laid, the fuse has been set, the gun has been loaded. There just needed to be one last trigger to set it off. And I don't believe that it was Prim's death that was the trigger. I believe it was Katniss's conversation with President Snow. Because let's say for the sake of this argument that Prim hadn't been killed. I do think she would still be very preoccupied with her family, and I do still think she would believe that the bombing of the Capitol Children was done by President Snow. But Katniss still would have gone to see Snow before his execution. Some people think the driving force for Katniss going to see Snow was because of Prim's death. I think it was something that Katniss was always going to do. She was always going to need to face President Snow in private, like they had done so many times before. Because as Snow says to her in the conservatory, they both have this dynamic where they are actually honest with each other. And even without Prim's death, those suspicions of Coin and those traps had already been laid. Katniss would still need answers to the questions she still had. And the only person she could get those from would be President Snow. And so I think even if you take Prim and the personal loss out of that conversation, the results still would have been the same. President Snow will still have said he doesn't waste life. Why would he bomb a pen full of his own children? Why would he do that? And Katniss would still come to the same realization that President Coin was the one who ordered the bombs, and that she was no better than President Snow, maybe even had the potential to be worse. And so to answer your question in an incredibly long-winded way, yes, I do believe that Katniss still would have made the decision to kill President Coin at the end of the series. Because much like Prim's death was set up from the very beginning, Coin's was also set up and had been laid out throughout the whole book. And if you have any other questions about the series, drop them down below. I am happy to answer them. I have read these books more times than I can count. I love them to pieces, and I am so happy to keep talking about them forever.